I always thought moving to a quiet, gated neighborhood would mean less drama, not more. But I couldn't have been more wrong. The day HOA Karen called 911 on my mom was the moment everything spiraled. None of us could have predicted how badly it would backfire for her. We had only lived in Willow Creek Estates for 2 weeks. My mom, Vanessa, had spent years in D.C. working high-profile cases for the FBI. And after a major bust involving international cybercrime, she was reassigned to a low-visibility post and chose to take some leave to spend time with me, her teenage son, while finishing a quiet investigation from home. We moved into the new neighborhood under our real names, but with no indication of her profession. She wanted peace, not attention. What we didn't know was that we'd landed right in the middle of a HOA. Dictatorship led by a woman named Karen Langston, mid-50s. Permanent scowl, obsessed with enforcing rules nobody else cared about, and who apparently had a sixth sense for outsiders. From the moment the moving truck pulled up, Karen was on us. First, it was the color of our shutters, apparently not in line with neighborhood standards. There it's my mom's car, a matte black government-issued SUV that had no front plate. Karen said it looked suspicious and accused us of running a surveillance operation from our driveway. We laughed at first. But then came the flyers-type notes shoved under our door about HOA fines, architectural guidelines, and threats of board votes. My mom, having dealt with actual terrorists and arms smugglers, shrugged off Karen's aggression. That is, until Karen crossed the line. One afternoon, while I was out skateboarding near the cul-de-sac, Karen walked right up to our door and began banging on it, screaming about unauthorized government vehicles. My mom was inside on a secure call with Quantico and didn't answer. That apparently enraged Karen even more. She whipped out her phone and dialed 911. Yes. I need to report a suspicious woman with a federal vehicle who refuses to identify herself, she told the dispatcher loud enough for neighbors to hear. She's either CIA, FBI, or something worse. When the police arrived 3 squad cars deep, they approached our door with hands on their holsters. I came rushing home just in time to see my mom calmly opening the door, holding up her FBI credentials. The officers, to their credit, backed down fast, apologizing and explaining that they were just responding to a concerned citizen's call. Karen stood on the curb, arms crossed, looking smug. "Just doing my civic duty," she said. And my mom didn't yell or argue. She took names, asked for badge numbers, and shut the door. That night, she made a call to her regional supervisor. She wants to play with the law. Let's see how she handles being on the wrong side of it, my mom muttered. If you think Karen's 911 call was the worst part, think again. What followed was a chain reaction of exposure, investigation, and community chaos that would shake the entire HOA board. Stick around, because this story is just heating up. Karen probably thought she had won something that day, standing there like some suburban watchdog watching 3 squad cars roll up to our house. Arms crossed like she'd cracked some major neighborhood conspiracy. But in reality, all she did was trigger the wrong person on the wrong day. My mom wasn't just some pencil pusher from a desk job in Washington. She'd been deep undercover in Eastern Europe, cracked encrypted dark web operations, and interrogated cartel leaders. She didn't need to make noise to make things happen. And that's what made everything that followed so much more dangerous for Karen. After the 911 stunt, my mom didn't speak much that night. She disappeared into the study, the only room in the house with blackout curtains and a locked file cabinet, and stayed on encrypted calls most of the evening. I knew better than to interrupt her when she went into agent mode. But the next morning, everything changed. First came the unmarked black sedan parked at the end of our street, with 2 federal agents inside. Not flashy, not confrontational, just watching. Then came the anonymous tip line that started blowing up the FBI's Neighborhood Security Division. According to my mom, someone, possibly Karen or one of her minions, had started digging into our background online and ended up pinging a few firewalled locations they shouldn't have touched. That mistake sent up red flags that triggered an internal alert. Mom was told to stay put, observe, and let them handle it. But even with the FBI monitoring the situation, Karen didn't stop. She doubled down. Within 3 days, She had organized a special HOA board meeting right on her front lawn, complete with folding chairs, lemonade, and a giant poster board labeled "Who are our neighbors?" Really? My mom and I weren't invited, obviously, but we watched from the window as Karen waved around grainy printouts of our license plate, photos of our SUV, and even screenshots from Google Maps with our house circled in red ink. She spun stories about surveillance vans, secret government operations, and how our peaceful community was under siege. Some neighbors looked concerned, others just awkward. One guy even walked away halfway through, but Karen kept going. The next morning, we found a folded letter shoved in our mailbox and notice. This time she claimed our security cameras weren't approved by the HOA and demanded we take them down within 48 hours or face escalating fines. My mom read it once, crumpled it up, and smiled. She wants war? We'll give her one paper. Trail and all. That afternoon, my mom sent out an official cease and desist letter through her bureau's legal office, citing harassment, defamation, and unlawful surveillance. The letter was delivered to Karen's door by a federal courier, and I watched through the blinds as she stood there frozen, reading the seal on the envelope. Her smug expression dropped completely. But that wasn't even the climax. That night, one of Karen's close friends, a woman named Brenda from 3 houses down, knocked on our door. She was nervous, wringing her hands, and kept looking over her shoulder. "I just thought you should know," she whispered. "Karen's been going through people's trash. She said she found something on you, something about classified documents." My mom's eyes narrowed. "Classified documents in the garbage," Brenda nodded. "She's telling people she has proof you're not who you say you are." That's when my mom opened a drawer and pulled out a hard copy surveillance log she'd been quietly keeping. Every interaction, every violation notice, every quote Karen said in public, called dated and recorded. "This has been going on too long," she said to Brenda. "Thanks for your honesty, but I need to take this higher." And she did. The next morning, a subpoena was filed under the Freedom of Information Act, requesting access to the HOA board's internal communications. My mom had reason to believe Karen had been spreading classified accusations about a federal agent, which in itself is a felony if done without proof. The board had no idea what was coming. Karen, still oblivious to how deep she was digging her own grave, continued her smear campaign. Flyers showed up on lampposts, urging neighbors to demand answers from government plants. She even made a blog called Expose the Fed, where she wrote dramatic rants accusing my mom of hiding spy equipment in our recycling bins. But she'd made a mistake on that blog. She published one of my mom's work photos from an FBI seminar that was never publicly available. That image was taken from an internal bureau-only presentation. Karen had either hacked into something, or someone gave her access they shouldn't have. That was the turning point. Within 24 hours, 3 government vehicles pulled up in front of Karen's house. No lights, no sirens, just business. My mom stood on the porch as they approached, nodding once before going back inside. Karen was escorted out, not in cuffs, but clearly rattled. Her phone and laptop were confiscated, and her home office was searched. Rumors spread fast, and neighbors started backing away from her. Brenda came by again, this time looking relieved. "Thank you," she said, "for standing up. Nobody else had the courage to face her." What Karen didn't realize was that calling 911 on an FBI agent wasn't just a mistake, it was a catalyst, a fuse. One that would blow open a world she wasn't ready to deal with. And as my mom said while sipping her coffee that night, "This isn't over yet, not by a long shot." She was right. The real storm hadn't even begun. And when it hit, the entire neighborhood would find out just how dangerous it is to cross the wrong mom. Ready to see what happens when the FBI fights back from the inside? The neighborhood was quieter than usual the next morning. But it wasn't the peaceful kind of quiet. It was that strange, tense silence you feel before a storm hits. People walked their dogs with their heads down, the usual morning joggers. Took different routes, and Karen's oversized lawn flags and neighborhood watch signs had vanished overnight. Her house, usually decked out like a rule-enforcing fortress, now looked like a crime scene that no one wanted to talk about. Word had gotten around. Of course it always does in places like Willow Creek Estates. Most neighbors didn't know exactly what the federal agents had taken from Karen's home, but they knew enough.
Ow.
Someone saw her being questioned on the porch another heard her yelling about her rights and accusing deep state spies of targeting her. And at least one resident mentioned she tried to delete her neighborhood blog in a panic. But the real drama hadn't even started yet. My mom, calm as ever, spent the next 2 days compiling every legal document, recording and witness statements. She could gather everything Karen had said or done that might qualify as harassment, defamation, or criminal interference with a federal employee. She didn't have to go looking far. Neighbors started coming to us voluntarily. Apparently, Karen's behavior had been escalating long before we moved in, harassing delivery drivers for parking the wrong direction, threatening teens over basketball, hoops, and even accusing a cancer survivor of violating HOA lawn care rules because her treatments kept her from mowing on time. These weren't just rules to Karen, they were weapons. And my mom had officially decided she was done playing nice. She met privately with the HOA board's vice president, an older gentleman named Richard, who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else than in the middle of this mess. "I've served on this board for 12 years, he said, nervously flipping through the cease and desist letter my mom had sent. "But I've never seen anything like this." She told us she was protecting the community. My mom leaned forward. She weaponized the HOA. She impersonated authority. She exposed restricted federal information online. "Do you have any idea what kind of jail time that brings?" Richard blinked like someone had just splashed cold water on his face. "What do you need from us?" My mom didn't hesitate. A formal vote to remove her, publicly, and I want the HOA to issue a statement distancing themselves from her actions. If not, I go through federal channels, and trust me, the HOA itself will end up under investigation for enabling misconduct. The next board meeting wasn't just tense, it was historic. For the first time ever, residents filled every chair, stood along the fences, and waited to see what would happen. Karen wasn't present. Whether out of fear, arrogance, or both, she sent a rambling email read aloud by the secretary, claiming she was being politically targeted and that outsiders were undermining the moral fabric of the community. That's when my mom stood up. She didn't yell. She didn't insult anyone. She simply passed out copies of her complaint, listed every confirmed false report Karen had made, then ended with a printed screenshot of the unauthorized FBI image. Karen had posted highlighted with the internal watermark that proved it came from a secure government platform. You could hear people gasp. One woman started crying. Richard stood, cleared his throat, and made the motion to vote. Within minutes, Karen was officially removed from the HOA board by unanimous decision, stripped of her role, fined, and warned that any further action could result in a civil suit. The room erupted in quiet whispers and sighs of relief, but it didn't stop there. The story began spreading beyond the neighborhood. A local journalist who lived 2 blocks over reached out to my mom asking for an anonymous interview. She declined to appear on camera, but she shared a few high-level details, mostly focused on HOA abuse of power and citizen overreach. A few days later, the article went viral. HOA president accused of targeting federal agent. And suddenly, Karen wasn't just a neighborhood nuisance anymore. She was a public embarrassment. But the most unsettling part came next. One night, while my mom was out on the porch reviewing emails, I noticed a black SUV, not one of ours, circling the block slowly. Passed once, then again, then stopped. Near the end of our cul-de-sac, the windows were tinted, the engine running quietly. My mom stood up, phone already in her hand, and took a picture. Within minutes, she was back inside and calling someone through her secure line. I could tell by her tone that something wasn't right. "No, not Bureau. This isn't one of ours. If it's surveillance, it's off books," she said. That night, she stayed awake until almost 3 a.m., watching the monitors and checking the camera logs. The next morning, she looked more serious than I'd ever seen her. Karen might not be acting alone, she told me. The fact that she accessed internal photos means someone gave her access or she bought it. That single sentence changed the entire tone of what had started as neighborhood drama. Now, it wasn't just about some entitled woman abusing HOA power. It was about potential breaches in federal data. My mom called in a specialist, a cybersecurity contact she'd worked with before. He arrived in a rental car, disguised as a cable technician, and spent hours reviewing our home network and surveillance logs. What he found was chilling. A remote login attempt traced back to a server in Nevada that matched a known data broker's site, a place where stolen credentials and government files were sold to the highest bidder. Karen had either bought information from that server or someone else had on her behalf. It suddenly made sense why she was so emboldened, why she thought she could block fire trucks, police cars, even FBI operations. Someone was feeding her just enough information to make her feel powerful, but not enough to protect her from exposure. My mom took all of it, every file, every trace log, every conversation, and escalated the situation to her bureau chief. This wasn't just personal anymore, it was national. If she's connected to any of this, my mom said, then she's not just a suburban tyrant, she's part of a bigger network. And just like that, the entire nature of our lives in Willow Creek changed. We weren't just dealing with HOA violations or angry neighbors anymore. We were sitting on a live wire, one that could lead to identity theft rings, data breaches, or worse. And Karen, she had no idea the storm she was about to face next. She thought losing her position meant it was over. But for my mom, that was just the opening act. When the truth came out, the entire country would know just how dangerous one fake 911 call could become. Ready for the next chapter in this unraveling web of lies, surveillance, and justice. The storm finally broke the day Karen came knocking not on our door, but on her own lawyers, trying to find a way to stop the freight train that was now barreling toward her. She didn't know everything yet, but she was beginning to realize that whatever dark little corner of the internet she had been dabbling in was no longer a secret. The Bureau wasn't just looking at her now, they were looking at her contacts, her digital history, her devices, and any financial transactions that might indicate how she'd gotten access to that internal FBI seminar image. Meanwhile, our neighborhood was transforming by the hour. The whispers had turned into conversations, and conversations into meetings. People who once feared Karen's clipboard and her HOA fines were now openly discussing her behavior, how long she had bullied the community, and how deep her obsession with control had run. But Karen was never the type to go down quietly. While the Bureau worked its case from the shadows, she launched a second offensive, this time online. She reactivated her blog under a new domain and began releasing what she called neighborhood truth files, a collection of manipulated photos, misquoted emails, and even audio clips of board meetings that had been secretly recorded. In one post, she accused my mom of running an illegal surveillance hub disguised as a single-parent household. And in another, she claimed the HOA board was under federal occupation. She even posted a side-by-side photo of my mom in FBI gear next to a labeled aerial shot of our street with our house circled in red, as if proving some kind of conspiracy. My mom didn't flinch. She forwarded every link, every screen capture, and every blog post to her bureau contact, who, looped in cybercrime and digital forensics. The more Karen tried to expose us, the deeper she dug herself into the hole. The real break came when the cybersecurity specialist, who had now officially been placed on site by the Bureau, cracked one of the metadata trails left behind by Karen's posts. It led to a private cloud folder linked to an alias that had uploaded more than just slander. There were PDFs, spreadsheets, and scanned documents, some of them redacted government files, others personal data about people in our neighborhood, including tax records, mortgage info, and even medical details. None of that should have been in her possession. That crossed a line. My mom made one final call that night, a direct line, to a task force that specialized in internal threats and domestic data exploitation. Within 48 hours, a sealed federal investigation was opened under the codename Operation Gatekeeper. Karen Langston was officially classified as a person of interest in an ongoing data leak case. But while the federal wheels turned behind the scenes, life on the surface kept moving. My mom advised me to keep my head down at school and avoid giving anyone information. No texts, no social posts, nothing. I didn't know who we could trust anymore, and I was starting to get scared. Then came the moment everything escalated beyond anything I could have imagined. One evening, while my mom was out on a bureau-secured call, I noticed movement outside the living room window. At first, I thought it was just a neighbor walking their dog, but Then I saw two figures dressed in dark clothing crouched near our driveway, one of them holding what looked like a phone or small tablet aimed at our house. I didn't even hesitate. I grabbed the emergency device my mom had placed near the hallway and hit the panic button. Within seconds, our home's private security system triggered. Lights flooded the yard, and the Bureau-issued cameras began live streaming footage to the secure server. The two figures took off running. I locked the doors, heart pounding, and watched as our security agent stationed just 2 blocks away arrived within 5 minutes. He didn't say much, but his face said it all. They weren't random, he told my mom later. They knew what they were looking for. Karen predictably denied everything. When she was brought in for formal questioning, she claimed she was being framed, that the files found in her cloud folder had been planted, and that the men caught outside our house were probably government agents sent to make her look guilty. Her paranoia was either real or an act no one could be sure. But what became clear was that she wasn't working alone. The data found in her folder had been accessed from multiple IP addresses across several states. Someone had given her the tools or sold them to her, and she had weaponized them not just against us, but against her own community. Every time she printed a violation, every time she'd find a neighbor or shared gossip disguised as board updates, she'd been feeding a system of control that was rooted in something far bigger than a nosy suburban woman. It was manipulation. It was surveillance. It was illegal. When the Bureau returned to our neighborhood, this time in full coordination with local police, they weren't quiet. They arrived in unmarked vehicles but in numbers. While half of them conducted a secondary sweep of Karen's home and electronics, the others began visiting homes across the neighborhood to take statements. The residents were finally speaking out. One by one, they revealed how Karen had blackmailed them into silence, threatened them with fabricated fines, or accessed personal details she should never have known. One man confessed she used his divorce records to publicly humiliate him during an HOA vote. Another woman said Karen knew about her breast cancer diagnosis before she'd even told her own children. These weren't coincidences. These were violations. As the evidence piled up, Karen was brought in for formal indictment. The charges ranged from harassment and impersonation of a federal officer to digital intrusion, data theft, and obstruction of justice. The total weight of the federal case was staggering, but the most surreal moment came during her arraignment, when her attorney tried to argue that Karen had simply been overzealous in her pursuit of neighborhood standards, and that her actions, while misinformed, were rooted in concern for public safety. My mom attended the hearing and later told me that the judge didn't even let him finish the sentence. This wasn't concern, the judge said. This was surveillance, coercion, and vigilantism disguised as suburban order. Karen was denied bail and placed under house arrest with tracking. But the damage was done. The neighborhood had been torn open like an old wound, its trust shattered, its illusion of perfection permanently cracked. Still, there was hope. In the aftermath of Karen's arrest, the HOA was restructured, new leadership was voted in, and my mom, quietly, discreetly, was offered a role as the board's compliance advisor. She declined. "I don't want control," she said. "I want peace and justice." And now we have both. But even as the dust settled, she kept our security up, our cameras rolling, and her eyes sharp. Because if there was one thing she knew, for certain, it was that people like Karen don't operate alone. The network that fed her was still out there. And the next time it tried to rise, she'd be ready, because now the whole neighborhood knew who my mom really was, and they were on her side. But what they didn't yet know was that the final twist in this story was still coming. One that would connect Karen's obsession to something far more dangerous than petty HOA politics. And when it came, it wouldn't just shake our street, it would shake the entire system. A few weeks had passed since Karen had been placed under house arrest. The neighborhood slowly began returning to something close to normal. The Halloween decorations went up without anyone measuring their placement. Kids rode bikes without being scolded for sidewalk chalk art, and for the first time since we moved in, neighbors were waving hello instead of whispering warnings. My mom kept her guard up, Of course, being a federal agent didn't mean she relaxed just because the surface looked calm. She knew better than anyone that storms don't always come with thunder. Sometimes they brew in silence. Our house was still monitored, our systems still encrypted, and her contact at the bureau checked in every 3 days. The federal case against Karen was strong, irrefutable, really. But something still didn't sit right with my mom. Karen had never been clever enough to dig into classified databases on her own. And while she had the audacity and obsession to stalk neighbors and exploit HOA authority, the exact path to her accessing FBI content hadn't been fully uncovered. My mom kept saying it over and over. Someone opened the door for her, and it wasn't long before she found out who. One evening, an unannounced alert went off on our network. Someone attempted to ping one of our devices remotely. Not Karen. This time the signature was clean, sharp, professional. The source IP was masked behind 3 layers of proxies, but our forensic systems backtraced a fraction of it enough to get a hit. It linked to a government contractor based in Maryland, not a hacker, not a rogue agent. A cleared federal subcontractor who had recently been flagged in an internal audit for unauthorized data extraction activities. The pieces locked into place. This person who had access to training archives, personnel images, and digital security credentials had been leaking information on the side for private use. He hadn't been targeting us specifically. He had sold access to a handful of entities, and one of them had been Karen. Either through a burner account or via a third-party neighborhood investigation service. Karen had paid for a report on the new resident Vanessa Crosand, received information that should never have been available to the public. This was the real breach. Karen wasn't a criminal mastermind. She was just the one dumb enough to use stolen government material to play dictator in a cul-de-sac. Now, with the contractor identified, the FBI's internal affairs launched a sister investigation, and my mom was placed as a liaison for the case. As she gathered the final evidence to close Karen's chapter for good, one more twist emerged. Karen had contacted a civil attorney to try and countersue the HOA, and shockingly, even my mom, for defamation, professional sabotage, and wrongful retaliation. It was ludicrous, but technically legal, and it meant my mom had to testify publicly. The court hearing was tense. Karen appeared in a wheelchair, which felt theatrical and staged, and tried to paint herself as a victim of government abuse. Her lawyer called her a concerned citizen and argued she had merely used publicly available tools to research suspicious new neighbors. When the prosecution played a voice message of Karen admitting she'd paid someone under the table for background scans, the courtroom fell silent. My mom took the stand with perfect composure, wearing civilian clothes, not a badge, and laid out the timeline, the harassment, the digital trail, and the danger Karen had caused, not just to our home, but to the federal chain of custody. Her final words to the court were simple. I've served my country without fear for over 20 years, and I've faced foreign criminals with more dignity than this woman showed her own neighbors. The judge ruled against Karen on all counts. Her lawsuit was dismissed, her bond was revoked, and she was formally charged in the federal data leak investigation, now upgraded to conspiracy due to her dealings with the contractor. She didn't go to prison that day, but she would. It was only a matter of time, in the neighborhood. Changed forever. The new HOA president was a quiet, reasonable woman named Lily, who reinstated community gatherings, transparency, and actual kindness. Neighbors began forming real friendships. We had a block party where people finally laughed. Again, my mom was approached by several residents asking her to run for HOA president, but she declined with a smile. I already have a job, she said, but I'll be watching. And just like that, life settled down. The mailbox violations, the driveway measurements, the hostile flyers all gone. The only trace of Karen that remained was her house, now under foreclosure, and her name whispered like a ghost story to warn new homeowners about what had happened here. As for my mom, she resumed her role at the bureau full-time, this time with a quiet reputation among her peers for dismantling not just criminal networks abroad, but corruption in the most unexpected places. Used to say that you don't need to carry a gun to bring justice. Sometimes all it takes is the truth, a calm voice, and a mountain of receipts. I'll never forget what she told me after it was all over. Bullies wear uniforms, some wear suits, and some wear name tags that say HOA president, but they all fall the same way when you push back harder. So if you ever move into a neighborhood and see a woman with a clipboard, a glare, and a hunger for control, take notes, because you never know who you're dealing with, and neither does she. If you want more true life-inspired drama, wild HOA confrontations, and stories where justice wins in the end, don't forget to subscribe to Sham Stories. We're just getting started.